you treat someone like an animal and they act like an animal. When you treat a person with respect and with dignity and trust and like a human being, they really do come into their own and they come into who they are on the inside, because one mistake is not who they are.
So true. So true. I was with women on Friday at Central California Women's Prison. Actually, here's another great example. Thursday night, I stayed in the home of this couple, Chris and Lynn. They both are military veterans, honorable discharges, but they also both committed crimes after they had been discharged. They both served many years in prison, came home, met each other. They're married now. They go back inside Valley State Prison and also Central California Women's Prison, and they put me up in the home they purchased on acres of land with goats and lambs and pigs, and it was just so beautiful.
Hello, welcome back. I'm Andreea Parc. And I'm Alexa Dumitru. And this is Alive.Again podcast, a podcast where attorneys and other professionals meet to discuss real life challenges and how our decisions shaped our journeys. Our guest today is Marc Vahanian. I'm sorry, I butchered a little bit pronunciation of your name.
Just fine.
Founder and executive director of Pathway to Kinship, a nonprofit organization that develops and runs programs to help justice-impacted individuals navigate the challenges of reentering society. The organization provides resources and opportunities to rebuild lives, reunite families, and work toward restorative justice. Thank you so much, Marc, for being here with us today. Such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I would like to mention that your brother made the connection. He read my stories and he was very happy to refer you to me. And I would like to say thank you for everything that you're doing, because it's a great, great need for people like you.
Thank you. And a big shout out to my brother, Jeffrey.
Yes, definitely, of course. So let's start from the beginning, because before Pathway to Kinship existed, that was you. And we all know that people don't just get to do things out of thin air, out of nowhere. So just share a little bit how you got to this point, where you were in your life, and how did you get involved with this work, and how did you get to start work at Pathway to Kinship?
I'd like to say I've had 3 careers that brought me to Hawaii, and that's a nice way to frame my story. So, but I was raised in New York City, not far from where you are. We were on 120th and Morningside Drive. And I grew up in the 60s. So it was actually a high energy time, but also in our neighborhood, a little right. Part of my relationship with folks who are now inside is that I was on the receiving end of crime. I was robbed. My brother and I were robbed. There was a lot of that kind of scary experiences. But I was fortunate. We were in a middle class home. Both our parents are psychologists, and there was help as needed. And they supported my quest to become an actor. And so I was on Broadway by the time I was 13 years old. It was amazing. And then a man named Stanley Kramer, a producer of films like Judgment at Nuremberg and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Hopefully you have a few attorneys that listen to this that are old enough to know the movies like Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. That's a long time ago. But Stanley came to New York, and I got cast at the age of 14 in a film called Bless the Beasts and the Children. And I was flown to Hollywood. It was like amazing. And I had quite a nice run as an actor. I was brought to Hawaii for an episode of a show called Heart to Heart with Robert Wagner and Stephanie Powers. And at some point in my quest to have a career, I was working, but it got slower and slower, and I was devastated in my 20s to discover they really didn't want me. I'm referencing actually Sally Field saying, hey, you like me, you like me. Well, they'd had enough of me. So I had to figure it out. And it was really hard because I'd thrown all my eggs in one basket. But I started doing fitness training. I discovered, having done a play where I was in great shape, and this is long ago before everybody and their so many trainers were around. And Ted Danson was one of my clients because he and I had been in an actor support group before. For those of you that know Ted, now Ted has the Inside Man or the Man Inside on Netflix, and there was
Yeah.
Cheers, Becker. Anyway, he became an early fitness client. And then among my fitness clients were Johnny Cochran. So Johnny Cochran, again, as some of you old enough to remember, he was
Yeah.
the attorney for O.J. Simpson.
Attorney.
I worked with him for over 15 years. It was just a beautiful relationship. He was really special to me and treated me very well. I continued to study more about holistic health and fitness. Mick Fleetwood and Stevie Nicks flew me to Hawaii for a tour they were getting ready to do. So that's two careers, two Hawaiis. And then I began studying more about healing, trauma resolution through the body. And when the dot-com bubble burst, Morgan Stanley flew me to Hawaii to work with 200 financial advisors, helping them process the trauma of having all these incredible losses. And what led to my discovering this work is that I was being sent all over the country by companies, and I also decided or discovered drinking, which was not a great call, and my wife did not approve. And so I went and got some help. And while I was doing this 12-step work, I read Father Greg Boyle's two books, Barking at the Choir and Tattoos in the Heart, and it just spoke to me. This Jesuit priest just spoke to me, and the language around extending the circle of care to those who have been discarded, specifically folks in prison and or who are justice impacted. And so I just started volunteering for different organizations. And then Sister Mary Shawn, another Catholic, which I'm not, which is kind of amazing, but these Catholics spoke to me. She brought me into prison the first time, and man, it just like my eyes opened, my heart just burst open. And I discovered that with all the different work between acting and fitness and then trauma resolution, I had a skill set and my own lived experience that lent itself well to working with these folks. And I just started volunteering, going to different prisons, and began developing a curriculum, and eventually founded this organization called Pathway to Kinship. And we now have 8 people working with us who are all formerly incarcerated, and another 10 part-time. And it's been amazing. We're in 10 prisons, and we have a whole reentry work going on. It's been a remarkable ride, helping people get their driver's licenses and first apartments and first cars, and in many cases, first jobs.
This is wonderful. Again, thank you so much for your work. And you're doing this only in California?
Right now, the in-person work is only in California. We have on the prison tablet called Edovo, we have one course called Criminal Impulsivity, and that's available nationwide inside the prisons. And we have another course coming up on domestic violence that will also be on all the tablets nationwide.
Yeah. My book, Alive.Again, is on Edovo, the English and the Spanish version. And why I was asking you, because we were trying to do work in prisons, but it's very hard to enter on the east side for some reason. I don't know why. Everybody that I've heard doing work in prisons are in California.
Well, I do know a couple people doing some work back east, so we should talk more and explore how I could be of any assistance in connecting you with people who are doing work inside. It is being done. And really, every state has their own rules. And then inside every state,
Every
literally
institution. Yeah.
they all have their own culture. And some are more pro rehabilitative work, and some are still caught in a very old notion of, I've had men and women say to me that when they first came inside in the 80s, for example, they were told the only way you're going home is in a pine box. So that's a pretty stark welcome to prison. And I'm finding that there are wardens and officers who have come around and are seeing the good that people got. I have so many of these stories. I have a guy named Brandon. Brandon, I met 5 years ago in Lancaster State Prison. He was serving life without possibility of parole. He was resentenced. He got a chance to go to the Board of Parole hearings after serving 25 years. He was found suitable. Now he goes in with me and or for Pathway to Kinship at Lancaster State Prison and facilitates from the same prison he paroled from. And you talk about creating an experience of hope. The men who recognize him and know he was sitting where they are now and is a free man is such an inspiration.
And we all know that, especially the three of us know that you treat someone like an animal and they act like an animal. When you treat a person with respect and with dignity and trust and like a human being, they really do come into their own and they come into who they are on the inside, because one mistake is not who they are.
So true. So true. I was with women on Friday at Central California Women's Prison. Actually, here's another great example. Thursday night, I stayed in the home of this couple, Chris and Lynn. They both are military veterans, honorable discharges, but they also both committed crimes after they had been discharged. They both served many years in prison, came home, met each other. They're married now. They go back inside Valley State Prison and also Central California Women's Prison, and they put me up in the home they purchased Thursday night on acres of land with goats and lambs and pigs, and it was just so beautiful. And then I went in, they put me up because Friday I was going into Central California Women's Facility, and I sat and got to work with, there's 4 women who were on the row, even though the death row doesn't formally exist any longer in California. These are women who served a long time on the row. And then I got to work with one woman who's preparing for her hearing. And it's an incredible thing to have conversations that are so heartfelt, hard to have, talking about the difficult things of what was the crime, why did you commit it, and what have you learned so you never have to commit a crime of property or violence again. And these are deep conversations to share with people. And it's been an amazing privilege to connect with people on such a deep level. And of course, all of the contributing factors that led to their commitment crime. And for those of you who've never heard that term, a contributing factor would be your home life, a gang, neighborhood poverty, all trauma. I'm not going to mention all the traumas because sometimes for some of us it's traumatizing just to hear them. But to a person, the traumas that I hear people grew up with are certainly play a big role. They're not to blame, as we know, but they do play a big role in what happens to shaping somebody's nervous system and, of course, the actions that they take.
You mentioned learning and unlearning. Was it anything that you had to unlearn before you started doing this work?
I think I had done a lot of work around being able to work with people and hold them in unconditional high regard. It was something I had learned from, and maybe the unlearning was the recognizing my own judgments and prejudices. So the practice, again, I had thousands of hours of working with people in fitness and or in the corporate world of helping build their leadership presence. So it became a muscle of being able to work through the lens of holding people in unconditional high regard. And I think that has served me well. There are still crimes that I find challenging to not let the crime distort my experience of the person who's sitting in front of me now. As you said, we don't want to be judged based on the one terrible thing that we've done in our life. And for so many of the people I work with, it's already 15, 20, 25, and even 30 years ago. So they've had a chance to build a new identity.
Yeah. As you mentioned, you worked with so many people, incarcerated men and women. What is the most common internal obstacle that you see people facing when they prepare for reentry?
Shame. That's the most common and hardest to unlearn, is the living with, when people start to come to insight and they look back on what they've done, well, what any of us have done where we've caused harm, it's the shame that can hold us back from moving forward. And for many of the folks I work with, that many of them have taken a life. So how do you can't undo it. It's harm you can't undo. So as Ken Hartman is one of the people that I so inspired by, he served 38 years in prison. He was LWOP. He was one of the first LWOP, life without possibility of parole, to be found suitable. And what he said was, at some point, he just decided, he made the decision, I can be a good person in here. I don't have to continue the behavior I have been continuing to do even since I've been here. I can stop and I can start to move forward one day at a time, one positive action at a time, and build a positive community and build a new sense of identity.
Yeah.
And he's proof positive because eventually they re-sentenced him and he was found suitable. And I've seen that a lot. So shame is the biggest obstacle. And of course, denial is another one. So I've certainly had people say, well, they had it coming. that
Yeah.
doesn't help you.
Yeah.
Denial is a big one, to unlearn and be able to accept, I did this. Nobody made me. It's not because of my parents. It's not because of the gang. It's not because of any of that. It's because I was selfish. I was vengeful. My character defects are what caused me to commit the crime I committed, not anybody else. So I think that is a shift that has to take place. And then from there, too, is to be able to say, well, I can't do anything about those things that I did, but moving forward, there's ways that I can have living amends, direct amends, and find ways to move forward. And instead of doing harm, do no harm and see what good I can become, a contributor rather than a taker.
You mentioned that with Pathway to Kinship, it helps people stay free, get free and stay free. How do you define freedom?
Well, that's a good question. As it relates to the folks we're working with, it's being free in here. And the folks that I speak to who were serving some version of a life sentence said they got to get free inside 2 years before they're found suitable. So it's freeing up in here from the things that hold us back, especially the limiting beliefs or negative beliefs about ourselves. A common limiting belief is, I'm bad. That's a real common, right? Connect right with shame. I'm bad. Who I am, not just what I did, but who I am, or I'm nothing, or I'm unworthy, I'm less than. Those are the kinds of things that hold people back. And I'm stupid is another one. When people start to unlearn some of that, that freedom starts to get birthed inside. And when they come home, one, being able to have a place to live that's clean and healthy and that they can afford. So in order to afford it, they got to be able to have some kind of a a job that's sustainable, that pays a sustainable wage, and then of course ongoing education of some kind. Some people it's going to be a college itself, and we've got people who are full-time college now as well. And for others, it's having a vocational training, whether it's as a plumber, as an electrician. There's lots of opportunities if the mindset has changed enough to say, okay, there's other things I can do. And I think that's part of what I bring to the table, because I've had to reinvent myself a number of times. I can see what's possible for people and help them see what's possible for themselves.
I don't know if it's a fair question, but what's the percentage of people who feel free in prison?
Here's the irony of that's a great question. Actually, no one's asked it to me, but here's an irony: is the people I see who are, and this is going to sound crazy, but are happiest are folks serving life without possibility of parole, who have in part surrendered to the what the sentence says, but are finding ways to be of service right where they are. So one of my favorite guys, his name is Nick. Nick is a literature mentor. So he's working with guys, helping them get their GED, high school diplomas. He's serving life without possibility of parole. He's one of the most grounded, even keeled people you want to meet. Now, he's done a lot of time to get there, right? He wasn't always like that. But so the people that feel freest seem to be the people who are pursuing an education, because that has so many possibilities. People who are discovering they're capable of learning at a college level. People who are being of service to others, helping other men and women prepare for the board of parole or their GED, things that are practical. And then one of my favorite people is Kevin. Kevin is serving whatever it is, some crazy, some of these numbers, 50 years to life. But he is learned Braille. He's helps people prepare for board. He rewrote our curriculum. I think in many ways he's already free, which is not to say that there isn't still the hope that someday resentencing is possible. And certainly all of the folks I've spoke to can acknowledge, yes, of course they would still like to come home.
But I felt so from personal experience, I was looking forward to come home. But the true work with myself was after I came home. And I've only been in less than 3 years. So I can only imagine people with 20 years. Because prison, institution, even if you work with yourself, it gives you a very strict norm of life that gets into the system and is very hard to rewire that. And I believe that's the reason why so many people find it difficult when they come home and re-enter society.
That speaks directly. We had a gentleman who's been inside for 28 years. And just this week, he said to me in front of the room, he said, so we had like 30 men in the room, and he said, I'm institutionalized. I'm terrified at the idea of going home. So, yes, there's a lot of work to do coming home with post incarceration syndrome, with PTSD. A couple of my just wonderful people I've gotten to know, it was too much coming home, and they turned back to drugs. And the lifers I've known, people who did more than 20 years, none of those people that I know have gone back into criminal behavior, and none of them have been recidivized. The statistics we hear especially apply to young men, and perhaps young women, but it's, 16 to 25 people who do a couple of years are the ones who are most likely to go back. The people who've served a long period of time, I find, have the opportunity to do that work on themselves and to get support when they come home. There is, certainly in California, more services available when people come home so that they don't have to sort it all out themselves, including we're able to provide, we have therapists available, groups, weekly groups, we have NAAA groups, we have empathy building, anger management, parenting. So we've built quite a community and an extended community with the other organizations that are doing this work. But yeah, there's a lot to unlearn if you're being told in one way or another that you're less than human.
Many reentry programs focus on logistics like housing and jobs and, education and things like that. But I feel that your approach is more on emphasizing more on the self-awareness and inner rehabilitation. Tell us more about that.
I'm a product of the human potential movement. So I attended my first encounter group back literally in the 60s as a teenager. And then later it was one after another. And I think being exposed to and experiencing the power of that kind of community and interaction, whether it was a therapy group with a therapist or a counselor or teachers in acting who value the ability to connect to your heart and express yourself. So we saw that creativity, self-expression, writing, performing in some way is such a healing and potentializing experience. So investing in our inner life is precious and just essential, I think, to being able to make a life with other people. So we certainly emphasize that you want to get free, stay free, and thrive, knowing how to build relationships. And that's something I've been very fortunate but also have walking the talk. So, it's people like Ted Danson I've known for over 40 years, and he's now a supporter of Pathway to Kinship. Drew Carey from Price is Right and the Drew Carey Show, he had been referred to me when I was doing fitness training, and he was referred to me by his cardiologist. And I can say that because he's been public about it. But, relationship. So 25 years later, Drew is one of our supporters for Pathway to Kinship. Ted is one of our supporters. And building relationships that last is profound and takes work. So we do highlight and emphasize the elements it takes to build trust with other people. And of course that applies to work or anything else, but being able to make promises and keep promises. And I think that's essential to beginning to build trust with people.
And in addition, awareness for society, for other people, for, because as you know, there's still jobs that will not hire people who have been in prison. They won't even look at anything else. They'll just say no based off that. And that's not fair, period. That's not fair. That's why we do this podcast, because we need to raise awareness and we need to show people, people who have been imprisoned come in all shapes and sizes, all different backgrounds, all different types of people. And they're good people at the end of the day. They are good people. They are people who have chosen to turn their lives around. And that awareness is something that is really important. And with more and more awareness.
And everybody's entitled to second chances.
Right.
And third and fourth.
Well, I think the more employers that have an opportunity to hire a second chancer and have that second chancer deliver on their promise, the more opportunities I think open up. One of the fellows that I first met in prison several years ago. He came home and went for a job interview, and the employer called me and said, well, this is the first time we've had somebody come in, and he showed them all his certificates from prison, because he'd never had a job before prison. So their minds were blown. And he started with them. His name is Justin. He started working with them, swinging a hammer, so construction. Within a year, he'd moved up as a supervisor. Since that time, he's also bought a home, and now he is engaged to marry a woman he met in church who works as a rocket scientist. I just said,
Anything is possible.
You can't make this stuff up. And he goes back inside as well and teaches financial literacy as well as our critical insight course. And he starts to break down what he learned about saving money and making a plan. And he learned it while he was inside. And he started to apply it so that he wasn't spending everything at the canteen. And he got to come home, and he's making a beautiful life. So the more people who get a chance to hire somebody who's been to prison, and the more of those folks who deliver, the more opportunities are going to open up. And of course, if the government, every state is different, but the more encouragement there is, the better things are. But these things take time, because we, of course, have had people be disappointed and turned down for jobs they were hoping to get, and sometimes even for jobs they did get, and then the background check comes back and they kick them out.
And I think people like you who help and advise people who are coming out, because a lot of, especially around us, there's a lot of people with no help, zero. And it really takes a lot of mental strength to come out and do.
Yeah, and to push through.
To push.
It does. And again, it does. And we need a community. We all do. That's my experience. I've been fortunate to have different communities, but yeah, we don't make it alone, and we don't make it through. We don't make it through discouragements and disappointments alone. It takes somebody who can still see the good in us, or the Peter Gabriel song, "Don't Give Up." Don't give up.
Don't give up, yeah. Tell us more about the 7 Keys curriculum.
So around 20 years ago, I was working with different corporations, and I was asked to work with a global advisory company. Anyway, they wanted me to do some work with some of their younger partners on the outreach to C-suite conversations to bring in new business. And so I was looking at what's needed, and I came up with this framework called the 7 Keys. Initially, this was all about the confidence to have the C-suite conversation. That went well as far as it went. I shared that with other companies, and when I started doing this work, I recognized that the 7 Keys framework could be repurposed with a different purpose. So the 7 Keys are purpose. So in our case, in the work inside, it's the purpose is to get free, stay free, and thrive. And passion is key 2, and what's needed to keep going. And key 3 is preparation. So you look at all of the things you need to prepare to be ready to get free and stay free. And key 4 is partnering, which is what we're doing right now. And key 5 is practice. And we look at the different practices. Some of it's patience is a practice. There's a lot of different practices. Being impeccable with your word. The 4 agreements is each of those is a practice. And key 6 is poise. And we talk a lot about how to manage our triggers. And the practice would be practicing when they're little triggers, so that when they're bigger, you've got that muscle under your belt. And key 7 is key 6, poise, and key 7 is presentation. And the presentation in prison is fundamentally, what did you do? Why did you do it? And what do you need to know so you never have to do it again, which is really a board hearing. And out here, it's what can you do for the employer? What have you done, and how does it translate for what you will be doing for the employer? Presentation.
Wow. Yeah, that is something that very few people understand, that without taking responsibility of life and relearning how to present themselves and what happened in their lives previously, it's the key to moving forward.
Absolutely.
We've had this long-running theme throughout this podcast about victimhood and how victimhood is always the downfall of every situation because it's always the excuse. I did this because of this. I did this because whatever. And how do you see victimhood in prison?
I think as long as people are in denial and stuck on all the things that were done to me, and that when any person translates this happened to me, that's why, that's the victim place. Whereas these are the things that happened to me, and here's how it affected me, and here's what I decided. So a common one, certainly for many of the women who've been harmed first before they did harm, it was, I've had one woman say, after all the things she'd been through, she said, if anybody puts their hands on, I'll never let another man put their hands on me again. And she's in prison for murder. So you go, yeah, those things did happen. These are horrible. And it's terrible when people are violated. And yet, as hard as it is, that doesn't translate as the right to commit murder. And so we're capable of justifying all manner of things and blaming others. And that cycle of blame and justification and denial keeps people stuck in, as you said, victimhood. Now, one of the things that has helped in this arena is bringing in survivors of crime. So we've brought in mothers and brothers and fathers who themselves have lost a son to murder, a brother to murder, themselves were attacked. And the remarkable thing is when one of these people comes in and tells their story, and then instead of being accusatory, they're not coming in to prosecute or re-prosecute the crime. They come in to say, here's the impact this crime continues to have in my life. My sister's still not here. My son is still not here. Comes Christmas, my brother is not here. But then they get to this place and they say, I was able to meet with the person who committed the crime, or the person who committed the crime finally took responsibility. And these folks, to a person, come with forgiveness in their heart. And one of the women, first name Jocelyn, her son, 23-year-old son, was murdered. And she comes in and she says, I'm sure you hurt too. I'm sure you have trouble sleeping at night. And I want you to know you too are redeemable. You too are lovable. And what I've seen is when men and women hear that message, it does break through some of that victim stuff. And there's the possibility of redemption. There's the possibility that, oh, maybe I'm not the worst thing I've ever done. It's a powerful thing. But even unlearning victimhood is a practice, because my sense is these things, they come back like a bad meal on you. These limiting beliefs and ideas about ourselves or experience of ourselves, we have to keep checking. Is that true?
Absolutely. It's something that we all have. We all do, whether we like to admit it or not. We all have this ego that's always firing when it doesn't like something. Oh, that person said they don't like something that I did, or they don't like the meal that I cooked. Maybe that's something that even though it's so silly, but it always comes back to bite you in the butt.
That's right.
Oh, and obviously I have different stakes with my meal. But it's something that we all have.
Because we're all
We're all
human.
human.
At the end of the day, we're all human, and forgiveness, I guess, is the only emotion or action that can bring us together.
And I actually have a question about the children of the people who are incarcerated. How have you seen, are the parents affected, the ones who are in prison? And how are the children affected if you've had contact with them?
It's all, so many of the people we work with have children themselves. And of course, all of them have some kind of a parent out there, whether it's a grandparent or somebody who's raised them. And one of the ripple effects of their crime is they're not home to help, right? They're not home to look after a mom or a dad or a brother or sister, or even more important, they're not there to look after their own kids. And that is a complicated, messy piece of business. And unfortunately, this is where we have generational passing on I've worked with people where it's 3 generations of criminality. Somebody whose grandfather is a gangster and their father's a gangster, and now they're in prison for it. So this is a complex and painful thing to observe. And I wish we, as Pathway to Kinship, had more resources to devote to families. And I wish as a society, we would address that, because that would be a transformational process. There's so much need and so much wreckage caused by the families that have been disrupted through, and this is on both sides, because very little is given to the victims or survivors of crime. Very little. I've spoken to survivors who said nobody's ever offered us anything. And they feel very likely, hey, you're bringing all this work you're doing all these things for the folks who've committed crimes. What about us? So we try to do what we can to support survivors and validate their experience and give them an opportunity to be heard. But boy, more is needed. More is needed.
Yeah. I read on your website that 7 million Americans grapple with the reality of having an immediate family member behind bars. That's 7 million
Unbelievable.
Americans.
Yeah, I know.
And then across US, over 10,000 individuals leave prison each week.
Yeah.
That's another incredible number.
It's just stunning. Both are stunning statistics. The more people we talk to, you'll find everybody knows somebody who's either, maybe they're not in prison, but they know people who are struggling with the same kind of issues. They're struggling with drug addiction, alcohol addiction, abuse. I mean, it's incredible. Once you start to have those conversations with people and create a safe enough environment where people can share from what can be a shameful experience. But yeah, there's too many folks still incarcerated who don't need to be. And may I just say, for anybody listening who's a conservative, I don't believe everybody should be let go. There's people who should be there. They're exactly where they should be. Thank goodness they're there. However, we can do a lot better. There's some fantastic talent and capacity to give back, come home, pay taxes. Let's get them come home, pay taxes instead of us spending money on them. Be great.
Yeah.
And that's why we are so open about our experiences on both sides, because, again, 7 million people have direct family members in prison. You never know who you're going to be sitting next to on the bus. You never know what pain they're going through. They just came home from seeing their parent in prison or whatever it may be. That's why we try to be so open. One time we were at a festival and we had a booth, and my mom had her book. This was 3 years ago. And she had her book on the table of the booth. And this woman and her daughter came, and the daughter was mid-20s maybe. And the mother read the title of the book, the cover, and immediately started crying. She said, my daughter just got out of prison. And the daughter had been interested in fashion, and I'm a fashion designer, and I had my stuff there to sell at the booth. And we started talking a little bit here and there, and we spoke a lot. And we exchanged numbers, me with the daughter, my mom with the mother. We all exchanged numbers, and they never reached out. So that's where the shame comes in. As open as you may be and as connected you may feel with someone, there's still shame there. And there really shouldn't be, especially with someone who knows where they're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know that any of us are 100% free of shame.
Oh,
Right. True.
yeah. And as much as we work on ourselves,
There's always going to be a moment.
pretty strong human emotions that is very hard to get rid of. And
Agreed.
yeah, and
Greed.
and greed and greed and yeah. And a lot of people speak about, healing. I personally don't believe that it's any human being that's completely healed.
I've done thousands of hours of therapy. I've received all kinds of help. And as my wife will attest, I probably need some more help.
Well, it is what it is. I mean, again, we're human. What can we do? And
The thing that
yeah.
helps me is to get my attention off myself and be of service. The more I do that, the less I think about my own nonsense.
Yeah. Purpose. Having a purpose.
Purpose.
I want to ask you about the professional reentry coach certification program that you're offering. How do you think that is helpful to people?
Well, for starters, we first offered it inside, and it was my collaborator on the curriculum is a man named John Brown, who's also a psychologist and has done a lot of work with folks inside. We recognize the capacity of so many of these folks to be coaches themselves, to be able to help others while inside. So the curriculum is to give them that framework and specific skills that allow them to help others. Now, some of them pair that with something called OMCP, which is a drug counseling certification that men and women are acquiring in prison. So you pair that with that, or a peer support specialist training. So they're acquiring a broader set of skills that will help both while they're inside to help others get free and stay free, but also when they come home, it does make it easier to get a job and to get a job that's paying a sustainable wage, whether it be in drug counseling or something else in reentry. I find those skills as a coach have a lot of application.
For someone listening right now who is just as impacted or they have a loved one, what does a true second chance require, and what gives you hope that that transformation is possible?
Well, what gives me hope that that is possible is I see it every day. I see people coming home and making good, fulfilling lives. And the fellow who's our Pathway to Kinship director of reentry, his name is Chris. Chris was arrested the first time at the age of 9. He was never not under the thumb of the justice system for the rest of his life. He served 20 years after that, after all his time in juvenile hall, in and out and in and out, and then a 20-year prison sentence. He's a magnificent example, and he works now. You can see him advocate for young people with judges, with the prosecutor, with the defense attorneys. He's in there every week, go into court and advocating on behalf of these young people getting that second chance. Justin, who I mentioned earlier, I mean, I just see so many examples of folks with lived experience who have turned it around and making a real life. One of my favorite guys, his name is Carlo with a K. Carlo came home, he went through construction boot camp, and then he injured his knee and he wasn't able to continue that, went into truck driving school. He's driving a truck, making a good living, and has formed a beautiful relationship with Rabia. Now they're engaged. Rabia works for another organization called Justice Impact. She writes grants. She served 11 years herself. She served 11 years in a Texas prison, and now she's one of the just most amazing. She helps us with community outreach. And so again, it's why I have hope is because I see person after person prove that this work has lasting impact, that people make good lives and can contribute to so many other people around them. They make the community better, they make their families better, and there's a lot of healing, as you know, when people have been away and haven't been able to help out. But I see it. It's real. It's real.
And we were talking about this a few days ago about how there's certain things that you have to relearn when you come out that you don't realize have affected you. Like when you came home, you had to relearn to cross the street, as funny as it is.
Funny. And I have seen the other side of that. There was a fella that I first met when he'd come home after 30 years and he was in a transition home, and he couldn't get on a bus alone. He had to have somebody with him. And that went on for a long time. His PTSD kicked in a level of social anxiety that my friend Chris, he's still walk into a big room or a restaurant, looking at a menu can be overwhelming. So yeah, there's lots of things like that over time, when you haven't had to make decisions, like here's a menu and it has 100 different things you can choose from, that can be absolutely overwhelming. He's been home 3 years. If we go out, I'll order for him. It's just easier for him.
Yeah.
It's just one less, overwhelming decision to make.
Before I ask you the last question, I want you to let the listeners know where they can find you and where they can donate.
You can go to pathwaytokinship.org. That's pathway to kinship.org. And there's a donation button right on our site, as well as you can reach me at Marc, M-A-R-C, at pathwaytokinship.org, KINSHIP.org.
And we will also write that in the description.
We'll include it in the description.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like it or not, the more people we can help, the more money we need. The more people we can help, the more funding we need. It is what it is. That's just part of the deal. No matter, there's lots that we're trying to do right now. One of our challenges is feeding 50 people meals a day at our center where people are coming for all this training. So we have a certain amount of funding, but it didn't include paying 50 meals a day. So those are the kinds of things that we're wrestling with.
Then now the last question, it's a question that I ask every guest, and that is, besides your work and responsibilities, what is one activity in your life that makes you feel more alive?
For full disclosure, I've been so obsessed with the work, I haven't played in over a year. So I owe myself a kick in the butt and to get back on a court, because it does make me feel alive. The other thing is nature. As I described early on, being at our friend's home in Raymond, California, which is just in the middle of it's all countryside, and to be around all the animals and, walking my dog is a great activity. And I love my dog. My dog is my pal. She's always happy to see me. My kids may not lift their heads from their phones, but my dog is happy to see me.
Yeah, well, dogs, the man's best friend, right?
Absolutely.
Proves the point.
Proves the point, yes.
All right, Marc. Thank you so much for your time and for everything that you're doing. It's absolutely amazing, and it's really needed work. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and let's continue the conversation offline. Happy to explore ways to help connect you to ways to get inside yourself. in the right way.
Yes, of course. I mean, our listeners, thank you for listening. For more conversations and more guests, please subscribe and follow us. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.